Roger, what is the most exciting record you've been associated with?
The most exciting at the moment has been the Brian Cadd album, which we've just finished, which is called Moonshine. And that's been completed about a week ago, and everyone's very happy with it. And it's going to be released in the States, and I hope it'll be a breakthrough.
Hi, welcome to Wrokdown. I'm Wendy Stapleton. One of Australia's most respected and distinguished producers and recording engineers, Roger Savage, is universally regarded by his peers as one of the best in the business. He began his career in London in the early 60s and famously engineered the Rolling Stones' debut single, Chuck Berry's Come On. Well, he came to Australia, and you'd have to ask, why? Well, we're about to find out. Would you please welcome Mr. Roger Savage?
Thank you.
Did you like that, Roger?
Yeah, I love that. You did that very well.
Did I?
Yeah.
Without a hitch?
Without a hitch. I don't think you need to do it again.
I won't do it again. Rog, were you born in London?
Yeah, born in Surrey.
What a gorgeous area.
Yeah.
Gorgeous area. So, as I said in the intro, you were sort of like really in the centre of it all happening in the 60s.
Yes.
Where did you start your engineering career?
Well, I wasn't... My first job in the music industry was at Olympic. Prior to that, I'd left school and worked for a TV company called Rediffusion in the technical area. I was interested in electronics rather than music. And a friend of mine, Keith Grant, who was then a music engineer at Olympic, said there's a job going at in the maintenance department of Olympic, and were you interested? And I said yes, and so I got that job. So you started really in the basement.
And you would have been a kid.
Oh yeah, I don't know, 17, 18.
That's a kid.
18, yeah. But Olympic was the leading. There was the IBC, Olympic, Abbey Road, and Lansdowne. There were really only about 4 serious.
So Abbey Road was happening then?
Abbey Road, yeah, EMI. But Olympic was considered one of the most progressive. They were the first with a 4-track, first with a transistorized desk. So I was a tape operator for about 4 years before I actually touched a knob.
You had to work your way up the ranks?
Yeah, I mean, a tape operator in those days was someone who would come in and set the studio up, plug up the microphones, plug them in, test them all, and then the engineer or the mixer would control the session, and then you sat in the corner stopping and starting.
So Rog, how did you end up at a little pub in England, in Richmond I should say, going to see the Rolling Stones?
Well, Andrew Lou Goldham was sort of a very sharp, he was a mod. In those days you were either a mod or a rocker or a whatever. But Andrew was very sharp, 3-piece suit. And he was a publicist. He would come in and spout, I'm just trying to remember what artists he sort of was publicising at the time. That's how I got to know him, before the Stones. And I would have got to know him through Olympic. And then I'd seen something about this group called the Stones at the tavern, I think it was, or the railway in Richmond, which is near where I lived. So I went to see them, and they had a sort of not a huge following, but they had a good following then, but they hadn't sort of hit it. And then I bumped into Andrew. He wanted to do a demo, so we did it. My recollection is we did it at night, on the quiet.
That's what I heard too.
Yeah. Because I remember them coming to the back door.
And no one had any money.
No, that's right. And I think it was over a weekend. Anyway, we just recorded those songs, and but the sort of embarrassing thing was that there was a piano player, Ian Stewart, who ended up to be their roadie.
Yeah.
So he was playing piano, and Andrew just told me to turn the piano off.
Not down, off.
Off. Well, down so far you couldn't hear him. And sort of nobody said anything.
What did you do? Oh, of course you had to do what you were told. Yeah.
Well, they'd never recorded before, really, so they weren't going to tell me how to balance at the time. Well, maybe they would have, but anyway, it became evident he didn't fit into the group, and that was Andrew's way of sort of easing him out.
He stayed with them for years, didn't he?
Yeah.
He became like their roadie tour manager, sort of.
Yeah. And then we did, with Andrew, he produced That Girl Belongs to Yesterday with Gene Pitney.
The obvious question is, if all of that was happening in London,
yes,
why did
I leave?
Why? I have to know, Rog.
Well, I was going out with Australian girl who was a receptionist at Olympic, Carol.
Ah.
And
Quelle surprise.
I don't know. Well, I got an offer of a job from the cricket's manager. He'd come over and I recorded the crickets without Buddy Holly. And Norm Petty was the guy's name. He offered me a job, and I thought, oh, that'd be interesting. Go travelling, and I was really close to going, and then Carol wanted to go back to Australia, and so I thought, okay, I'll go.
That's an amazing thing to do, actually, seeing that you were sort of actually right in the thick of it. So you came to Australia. We're going to take a short break and find out what happened in '64.
I think, yeah.
We'll come back and find out what happened to Rog when he landed in good old Australia. Be back soon.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My special guest this evening is recording engineer and producer Rog Savage. Roger, you've decided to leave England, the swinging London scene, and come to Australia. And you came to Melbourne.
Yeah. I came to Melbourne because that's where Carol lived. Although I was given a letter of introduction to EMI, which is in Sydney. And in fact, that's where it was all happening in Sydney, because Johnny O'Keefe was probably the most high-profile act. And in fact, that's where the connection is with Robert Stigwood. I think he had something to do with O'Keefe.
Oh, okay.
And he was a client of Olympics because I used to record some of his acts. So he wrote an introductory letter to EMI, which was, I assume, it would have been a festival and EMI, the two major recording studios.
In Sydney.
Yeah, and in Melbourne, I think it was just W&G at that time.
There wasn't really much here, was there?
No, it was just W&G. So anyway, I didn't get a job in Sydney, so I ended up in Melbourne, and then I started to freelance. Bill Armstrong was managing a studio called Telefil, which was owned by a guy called Brian Horman, who actually also owned Court Recordings. And Court Recordings he had the contract to record all the court cases. So I did some freelance work in the courts. We had to listen to these court cases and buzz. One buzz for the judge and two buzzes for the defence and another buzz so that the girls who were typing up knew who was talking. That was exciting work.
I was just going to say, you've just come from London recording the Rolling Stones and then you're sitting in a court in Melbourne getting 1, 2 or 3 buzzers.
Yeah. I was recording.
God, you must have been in love.
That didn't last for long, because I then started to freelance out of Telefil as an engineer. Well, you call it engineer producer. I mean, there were no producers, you see, at the time in Australia. So being the engineer, you ended up being the producer, making decisions. You know, that takes good enough.
Mm.
So then I recorded Lynn Randell. Then Astor had to go label, so it was then Bobby and Laurie I Belong With You, which was the first
Mm-hmm.
big hit, and then there were a whole series of MPD.
And that was for Astor.
That was for Astor.
So where were you recording?
I was recording
then?
at Telefield Studios in Ackland Street.
And that was Bill's.
Bill was manager.
Bill was manager.
Oh,
He didn't know it. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a manager. And so did a whole lot of stuff there for the Go label, The Strangers, Pat Carroll.
You recorded the group.
Yeah, the group,
Ronnie Charles.
which was, they were also Melbourne, but it was like a Sydney label, which was, wasn't Festival, I'm just trying to remember the name of the label.
Yeah,
anyway.
I don't know either.
And Normie Rowe.
Normie.
Normie Rowe. And then the Easy Beats for Albert Productions, Ted Albert.
And that's unusual because they were sort of Sydney, weren't they?
Yeah, but this was their first album, first single. an
Okay.
album. And then Bill left, and between us we started Armstrong's in 100 Albert Road.
And that started out as, am I right, one little building to start with?
Yeah, one very small single story, 100 Albert Road that was, and then we put one studio in there, and then we expanded to 110, which is 110. You know, the one next door, and then we moved. Then we got another one about 4 doors down. We had cables going over the roofs, connecting them all.
I remember, sorry to interrupt, but a young Ernie Rose evidently, was his dad or someone a carpenter or
No,
something?
his dad was a builder.
A builder, and Ernie was telling me that he thinks the reason he got a job there was because he could build the studios. Is that right?
Possibly. Knowing Bill, it could be true. Yeah, no, I remember Annie being there. So then we started doing, David Mackay was a producer with EMI, so David used to fly down from Sydney, and we used to record them at 100 Albert Road, and that's when we started working with Graham Thurkle, and Graham used to build and design these local multi-tracks, so you know we went up from 8-track to 16-track to 24-track.
So your real love, in actual fact, Roger, rather than actually being like a producer that tells the musos what to do, your real love is actually the mechanics and
The technical side.
the technical side.
Yeah, it's a combination, because it's a combination of that and what it can do. I remember we built a box to do, because Ichiku Park came out, which was the first use of phasing.
Okay.
And so we had a box. We actually built this box, Graham built it. We did a purple harem clip. A purple harem. Purple harem, whiter shade of pale. And Jill actually cut it she worked for Fred Skepsy. We had to synchronise it up to the pictures. So Graham built this box that allowed you, with a knob, to change the speed of the multi-track, and later on we could work out that we could do phasing, which is all the real thing stuff. On the end of the real thing is all that phasing.
So phasing, for people that don't know, is that...
Yeah, which is very groovy then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Armstrong's was also quite progressive technically.
Well, it became the place.
Yeah.
It became the place in Australia to record.
That's right, yeah, in the, this would be the 70s, wouldn't it?
Late 60s, 70s, I'm guessing.
And Bud Parkinson in focus, and yes, it was there was some crazy times.
Fun and games in Albert Road. We're going to take a short break, soon we'll be back and hear more about Roger Savage, AAV Australia, and your, not latest venture, it's been about the last 10 years, your film, sound company.
Soundfirm, yeah.
Soundfirm. We'll be back soon.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My special guest is the wonderful Roger Savage. Rog, we're moved on from Albert Road.
Yep.
The whole Box and Dice has moved to a great big butter factory in Bank Street in South Melbourne. This was a huge building, wasn't it?
It was. It was, I think, 4 stories, and it was empty. So what we wanted to do is build a big studio to do large orchestras, because in Albert Road we just had to keep doubling up strings.
Because it was smaller, confined
Yeah.
spaces, yeah.
That's right. When I think about it, we did the Farnham album there with string sections, and you could just squeeze in 12 players if you were lucky. So anyway, we found that, and then developed it. The ground floor was we pulled one floor out to double the height of the large studio, Studio 1. Still had columns in it, and then Studio 2, which was back to back, and then the other area was all voiceover. So the part of the income was advertising,
Yes.
doing voice recordings, which was pretty constant and lucrative, and the other was either doing records or film scores.
So basically, AAV became the place to go to, didn't it?
In Melbourne at that time, there was the one at Channel 9,
TCS?
TCS. I'd say TCS and Bank Street were the 2 main ones.
The main ones. There were smaller ones.
Mushroom started then, and they used to use TCS sometimes and use us depending on who the act was.
Yeah.
And
it was a huge. What I remember is, Studio 1 was huge. Studio 2 decent size, as you see, all the voiceover studios there. Something else was going on upstairs, and I don't know.
Well, what happened is that David Syme bought,
which was the Age.
Which was the Age, bought Armstrong Studios from Bill and myself, and bought another videotape company called VTC, and put them together as AAV, Armstrong Audio Video.
That's right.
So now it was, and they took the top 2 floors, so sound was
downstairs,
yeah.
Or video upstairs.
Video upstairs. So it was bigger setup, and Bill and I were directors of audio, and then Bill left to follow 3EA. He got the 3EA contract.
Eon or
Eon.
Eon.
Yeah.
So he left to do that.
He left to do that, and then I was getting more and more jack of the music industry, actually, the rock and roll industry.
I don't know why, Rog. We were all so nice.
Well,
Such nice
there were
people
so many
to-
precious bloody producers who would come in there and demand that we change the speaker, because he doesn't work with those speakers, or change that multi-track, and they became such a pain.
You couldn't handle it, could you?
No,
I used to love it, Rog, because I used to work, as we all know, I used to work there a bit, and go upstairs and say to your gorgeous, and I think Helen is still working for you.
Yes, that's right.
28 years or something like that. Helen Field. Helen was your secretary and still is. And everyone would walk upstairs and say, "Where's Roger?" And her standard answer was, "He's at the bank."
Oh, really? Was it?
Yeah. I was, God,
I would borrow it,
God,
I'd
you
say.
must be rich, Rog. In actual fact, it was after a while. It was well known you weren't at the bank. You just couldn't stand having to put up with all of these whackers, and you were just in your office with your
Somewhere
door
else.
bolted.
Yeah.
I don't blame you, Dane.
Yeah, no, look, it got a bit much, but I was more interested in doing in orchestral stuff there. I'd moved a bit, and doing film scores in particular, and going out in the truck, recording at Blackwood Hall. We did Bruce Rowland's orchestral stuff, and
So this is the OB van.
The OB van, yeah. And then I mixed Mad Max 1.
How did you get that job? Can I ask?
Well, Brian May was the composer, and I'd recorded the music and met George Miller and Byron Kennedy, two guys, and they really didn't have the money to finish it, and they were going to go to Adelaide or somewhere weird to try and mix it on some conventional small mixing theatre, and we had just got this synchronizer from America because of the video department upstairs.
Okay.
And you could lock up a video machine and the multitrack.
So that's where it all started.
That's where it all started.
From being AAV.
Yeah, because they had the box, and I said, hey, we could do this if we can get the picture onto a videotape instead of onto film. We could use this 24-track machine and have lots of lots of tracks. So we worked out a way of projecting the picture on the screen, and so I borrowed the video truck, and the audio truck took them down to a double head theatre, and we shot the film off a camera pointing at the screen onto a video machine, and took the sound into the multi-track of the audio truck. It was quite a big operation. They had no money for any of this, so it was all very experimental. So we put the two together, and we mixed the film. So that worked really well.
My head's spinning. My head's spinning just trying to get that, Rog. But the thing is that's why you are who you are, and you were nominated for an Oscar.
Well, not
for your
for
work.
that one. It was Moulin
No, I
Rouge.
know it wasn't for that one, but that's why you are who you are.
Yeah, so I did that, and then I thought, this is really quite good fun, mixing films.
Moulin Rouge, nominated for an Oscar.
Yes, that's the nomination.
Did you go? Did you go to the awards?
Yeah, I went to the awards.
How was it?
Oh, it was just a circus. It was just, bizarre. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad I did it. But it's pretty huge.
Look, I can't tell you how thrilled I am to have you on the show. We've known each other a long time. I've always been in awe of you. You know that.
It's nice.
Um,
I've always been looking at you through the glass. On the other side of the...
Oh, isn't that gorgeous? Roger,
Doing
thank
those
you.
Jingles.
All those jingles. All those jingles.
Who knows any
all those
better?
jingles and a couple of my singles.
Yes.
Roger Savage, thank you so much.
Excuse me, I keep coughing.
It's fine, I don't mind. You can cough. Cough all over me. We'll say good night to Wrokdown. Good night. See you next week.